All right, welcome to the Fortify Your Data podcast. I'm here with Ari Lewis. Now, Ari Lewis is a prodigy in the Cleveland blockchain space now, whether he wants to admit it or not. He's on cranes, he's running around. I actually briefly met him at Blockland last year, I think with Frank Amato and Gianni. I'm not sure what his last name is anymore. It starts with a D. You know what I'm talking about? D'Alerta, yeah. So I think you were hanging out.
Might have butchered his last name, though.
Yeah, that's okay. I wasn't willing to do it. So I was hanging out with him. We really haven't spoken a whole lot since, and this is going to be kind of a discovery interview because I am going to ask questions that I really don't know any of the answers to, pertaining to what you do, what you want to do, and how you kind of got into this space. But before we do that, let's start with, how did you become a person in the blockchain atmosphere of Cleveland?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on the podcast.
For sure.
I really appreciate it. And in terms of me being a prodigy, I would just say that I'm learning every day and just humbled to even be included in the stratosphere of some people I consider much smarter than me. But in terms of getting into this space, I got into Bitcoin in 2011, and I was really lucky that I was connected to someone who started mining out of their house, and they introduced me to Bitcoin. And I ended up creating a mobile application or a mobile web application in 2013 called Koala. And Koala was a esports company which did betting with Bitcoin. So if you ever played a game like Angry Birds, instead of playing it single player, you could do it multiplayer, and whoever got a higher score, you'd bet on the outcome of it, and you could win, 1 Bitcoin or 2 Bitcoin or whatever it was. So we did that, and Flash Earth, which is Charlie's Shack, a local incubator in town, invested in us. Unfortunately, the company didn't succeed, but from that we ended up getting deeper into the cryptocurrency space, and in 2017 I started a fund called Grasshopper Capital. So Grasshopper Capital was a cryptocurrency fund that invested in cryptocurrencies and digital assets for high net worth individuals, family offices, and other institutional investors. That fund ended up getting acquired in late 2017 by an Australian asset management firm. And just through that and my experiences, I ended up getting deeper into the space. And I think what really was a great help is I was an outside consultant to the state of Ohio. In the state of Ohio, they released a program called Ohio Crypto, where Ohio became the first state in the country to allow its citizens and businesses to pay their taxes with cryptocurrency. So they hired me as the outside subject matter expert to help them implement that for the state. So I had the opportunity to speak at Blockland and talk about how Cleveland's trying to be, and rather Ohio in general, is trying to be at the forefront of technology and innovation, because I think if our government and our policy leaders show that we're trying to be innovative, maybe the private sector will also be encouraged to come here and realize that this is the place to do business and this is the place to be.
Sure. And so when you started your first company, was it Koala?
Correct.
Was that in New York or was that in Cleveland?
That was in Cleveland. I should have mentioned this. I went to Case Western in 2013,
Gotcha.
And I graduated in 2017. But I'm originally from New York.
Yeah, so I was just wondering because Charlie Stack obviously is of local fame. I'm like, what's he investing in New York companies for? So you were kind of aware of Bitcoin early on. I assume your friend or you were mining when GPUs were still a valid way to do that on a video card.
So I was not mining.
Yeah.
But yes, he was mining on his laptop. So
I was, and I sold mining too quickly. So
yeah, we all have stories.
Yeah, right. It's hard to forecast those things.
Yes.
But I think that if you're here sitting around talking about Bitcoin today, you sold too early. Because if you didn't sell too early, you wouldn't be doing anything.
I could have made a lot more money than I did.
Sure,
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, with me, I remember, because Bitcoin was always a few dollars, and then when I looked at it, I'm like, you can get over $100 for a Bitcoin. Are you kidding me? That's like 1,000%. What? Yeah, done. How many? All of them. Here, take them all. I don't need this garbage. Right? Now, I was very fortunate that at the time, I was mining. I was also getting into Litecoin, and I forgot that I mined a bunch of Litecoin. And then later on, I was like, oh yeah, I have that wallet. And so that was I just moved all that Litecoin into Bitcoin, and then I've been riding up this last wave, which is now taking us back down.
Yeah, I know a few stories of folks who have forgotten that they had cryptocurrency and discovered
it's pretty nice,
quite large sums years later.
So what is it like? You know, and forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but you're still somewhat involved in investing or helping people invest in cryptocurrencies or blockchains, whether it's for their business or if their business is around blockchain, right?
Sure. So so I have two businesses. Most of my time is spent on a company called Greenblatt Group, and Greenblatt Group is a strategic communications firm and an innovation consulting firm that there's really a lot of our clients are in the technology space, and some of them do blockchain technology, but that's not our primary focus. And with those clients, we help them, or with companies that aren't in the space, we do sometimes help them navigate, what emerging technology trends they need to think about, and part of that is blockchain and fintech in general. But with Grasshopper, which is more pertinent and more relevant, so Grasshopper is raising a second fund that will be a venture fund only. Will be high eight figures in terms of AUM is what we're targeting to raise, and that will purely be investing in blockchain equity. So we won't be investing in like Bitcoin or Ethereum or other digital, public blockchains, but we'll be looking to invest in equity positions of companies that are supporting those infrastructures, or some maybe they're permission blockchains or things
like
technology.
smart contracts.
Yeah, or stuff that maybe is being built on Hyperledger or stuff around Hyperledger, as an example of a permission blockchain.
So what is a good fit for that fund?
Yeah, so if you're starting a company that is using some type of blockchain technology, or there's a cryptocurrency application to it, we'd be interested in talking with you and investing in you.
Yeah. And so, when talking about blockchain, there's like really two major schools of thought I experienced. The one is blockchain is going to be implemented, worldwide in many different use cases. And the other one is it's really about cryptocurrency, right? And keep it around funding. I guess let's weigh in on that thought, and then I'll take it a little further.
Yeah, so my opinion has been that I'm a big believer in public blockchains, and I think that cryptocurrencies have the most value compared to permissioned blockchains, in the sense that anyone can join, whether if you're using a proof of work consensus or in Bitcoin, anyone can join the mining network. With these permissioned blockchains, you have to be approved, whether it's you're using a validator, a node, or whatever type of consensus mechanism they're using, and do you really need a blockchain for it? I think all these people are saying, oh, we need a blockchain, we have to have a blockchain. But you really don't. A lot of the time, I think people want to just say they're using a blockchain. They choose to use these permission blockchain solutions where they don't really have any value. I think on the permission blockchain side, where there's a lot of interesting applications, are around consortiums. So if you think of a consortium, like Swift is a consortium. And what I mean by a consortium are member groups, where they all have incentive to be honest in the network. So if you have a consortium of big banks, for example, that are focused on something like settlement, they might have an interesting solution and way to solve that problem, because they're all incentivized to keep the system honest. But if you have a central party controlling a permissioned blockchain that is selling it to all these folks, well, why do you need blockchain for that? Why can't you just have a digital platform? You have to trust a central entity anyway. So, that's sort of been my thesis on it, and I think if you go down that consortium permission blockchain route, there's tons of applications, and you're talking about billions and trillions of dollars of potential, but we haven't really seen a ton of that. I think most of the innovation that has occurred in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space, and that's why you hear more about it than the other permission blockchain stuff. Sure.
And I guess from my standpoint, I look at these money kind of based applications, and it's a pretty easy to understand or grasp concept, right? Whether it's a lottery or it's a contest or betting or just exchanging funds like an investment, it's a lot more easy to get your hands around. And yeah, in some situations, you'd be better off using an Excel database. With the hype around blockchain, and you are in a role where you're seeing other companies use it, you're vetting at other companies, what are the biggest challenges you face when you're looking at a company and saying, are you a blockchain company? Is your application of blockchain valid?
Yeah, so I defer more to the technical experts
Sure.
at Grasshopper when it comes to those types of things. I would say I'm not the technical guy by any means.
Yeah.
I will say that I think a lot of the times companies need to ask themselves, do we really need a blockchain for this, right? And there's a lot of ways to think about that, but what it really comes down to is like, is there a trust issue, and like how can that trust issue be solved? So if you have a central party continuing to manage that trust, which is happening in a lot of these like permission blockchain and a lot of these blockchain solutions we're seeing, you don't need a blockchain. Blockchain doesn't help you. So what I would say to that question is, yeah, I think a lot about like when these companies are these valid solutions and stuff. I go, well, do you have this trust issues? It's a big problem, and most of the time it's not being solved by their solution, because it's the same solution being delivered that existed before blockchain, which is that you have a central party managing trust.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. So you're pretty big in the Cleveland sphere now. You definitely have dedicated a lot of your time and effort into writing thoughtful pieces on why people might want to move to Cleveland, or why businesses need to develop more in Cleveland. What initially brought you into Case, I guess, when you were looking at colleges, and then what's keeping you in Cleveland?
Yeah, so I was recruited to play soccer at Case.
Okay.
So that's actually how I found out about the school and ended up coming to Cleveland.
All right.
And then what's kept me here is I really love it here. I think that there's a few reasons why I find a lot of value here. One, it's so easy to speak with like the business leaders in the community. Someone like Bernie,
Mm-hmm.
if anyone emails him right about Blockland, he responds super quickly. Like, doesn't matter if you're some random guy or the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic. He's just super quick at responding and gets back to you. And I think that's really a lot of the leaders in the community. They're willing to meet with different people. And when you're in New York, when you're in LA, there's a lot more gatekeepers. There's a lot more of this network that exists where you have to break into it.
Yeah.
And from Cleveland itself, I think it's really a great place to live. There's a lot of culture here. The food is great. There's low cost of living, and I really think there's a huge opportunity here, because if you think about Silicon Valley, think about New York, right? When you build a startup out of a garage, and obviously that's not really how it's happening anymore. But if you think about the cost of that garage in Silicon Valley, the cost of that garage in New York, it's $1 million. You can build that company here out, for 1/10 of the price, 1/20th of the price. And I think that's just such a significant difference. And we have the talent here, right? There's talent here. I think that, we can always improve, right? I would love to see more young people here. I would love to see, continue to try to get smarter people here. I think that, we got to ensure that we keep setting good policy. So whether that's locally, whether that's at the state level, and continue to push on these things, which for example, my work at the Ohio Treasurer's Office, they did a lot of really interesting initiatives that made Ohio first on that front. So in the state of Ohio, we have something called Ohio Checkbook, where the Treasurer's Office put the state checkbook online. So anywhere from a pack of pencils to a road contract, you could see online. And I think that's a really good example of the interesting stuff that's happening here, because it's happening at the public sector level, it's happening at the private sector level, it's happening in the nonprofit space, where there's this interesting stuff, and we need to tell people about it. We need to educate more people about it. So I hope more people continue to discover that Cleveland and Ohio is a great place to live and a great place to do business.
And as we're trying to bring more talent here, which working in the cybersecurity, data security space during the day when I'm not here, it's hard. It's hard finding good security guys, particularly that have all the right certifications and just have the right background to do a lot of these red team, blue team stuff, or things rather. What are some things you think we could be doing better to keep those people and retain them here?
So I think, from the point of getting people here, we need to figure out a way. So for example, in the state of Arizona, they have a program where they have offices in the city of San Francisco that recruits companies and engineers to move to San Francisco. I'd love to see the state of Ohio have offices in other cities where all it would do is promote, and maybe they do, I'm not aware of it at the moment, but where we go and we recruit engineers, or we recruit smart folks to come move to Ohio. Axios did a study a few months ago, and they said 3 out of 4 tech workers are going to relocate from San Francisco. So I think over the next 5 years, and I think that's really pertinent. Like, where are they going to go? Mm-hmm. Right? And honestly, I don't know if they're necessarily going to come to Cleveland, or they're necessarily going to come out to Ohio, but I hope they do, and I think they should definitely take a hard look at it, because we have so much going for us here. And when we talk about like retention as well, I think the story of Cleveland is not told in the correct light. Many times when people think of us, they think of us, we're the city that's, where the river caught on fire, right? We're the stake on the lake.
Yeah.
And LeBron obviously did a lot to change that. We won an NBA championship, but I think we need to continue to highlight the benefits and the positives of this city, and Ohio in general, because I don't want to just focus on Cleveland, and so I hope that employers, I hope that the government continues to highlight these things, and I think that's really the key, is highlighting all these positives that exist here.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So when you're talking about Ohio from a more broader perspective, and you're looking at some of the other major cities, Columbus, Cincinnati, even Toledo and Youngstown, Columbus is kind of the big kid of that block, right? They're kind of, from my observation, killing us when it comes to bringing tech talent there. Do you have any insight in what they're doing that maybe Cleveland and these other cities aren't?
So I think Ohio State is a huge help to them, right? Sure. They have that young talent pool here. But I think we do too. Obviously Case Western isn't as big of a school. Obviously CSU isn't as big of a school, but they're still the young folks. But I think where they've really done a good job is getting young people there and keeping them here.
Yeah.
Keeping them there. And I hope that we do a better job of that. And we got to continue to encourage young people to come here, and we got to encourage young people to stay here. So, OSU, they get people to stay in Columbus, and I don't know if that's because it's a state school where there's a lot of local, or rather state residents going to the school, but I think for people who don't live in Columbus, it's a good way to test the city out, right? So you live in Columbus for 4 years as an OSU student, and you're like, wow, this is a really great experience. I really hope Cleveland highlights the benefits, because the thing that we have going for it that Columbus really doesn't. So expensive, Columbus, especially with housing. If you want to buy a house, it's like $600,000 in places like Upper Arlington and Sherman Village, which if you take like comparable areas and you apply them to Cleveland, it's like $200,000 for that same house. So I think that's a big difference. Figuring out that young person, that millennial,
what they need,
Gen Z type,
Well, I think that you're kind of seeing that because I'm on Euclid downtown a lot, and almost the entire section from Playhouse Square to Tower City is turning into apartments slowly but surely. So they're creating more of a residential atmosphere. I'm curious to see what that kind of turns into, and the flats being rejuvenated is a major win. But I still worry that there's a lack of tech companies coming to Cleveland or growing in Cleveland.
Yeah, so that is where do we get investment from? And the reality is that people are not investing in technology here, and I think that's a problem.
What do you think they are investing in?
So you think about like the family office, and the foundations. I know a lot of family offices invest in real estate. That's a big, commercial real estate is a big investment. We have a lot of private equity here that's done really well. So even though Cleveland is a smaller city, especially compared to the big financial hubs, there's a lot more private equity here than there is in larger cities, which is really unusual, and that's just due to the fact that we have a lot of manufacturing history. So it was just a natural place for these private equity firms to be. But I think we need to turn investment here into something that these people are passionate about, because they'll write a $10 million, a family office, the principals write a $10 million donation to the Cleveland Clinic, but they won't write a $20,000 investment to a local startup.
Yeah.
How do we change that mentality and that mindset? I think that's a huge thing we need to figure out.
So you're going to solve that issue for us, right?
Well, I hope so. I hope that I can make a lot of money and then just start
Yeah.
investing locally in Cleveland. But I would love to figure out a way for these family offices, these larger investors to how do we educate them on these topics, right? Because I think I'd like to believe they want to invest. They don't know who to necessarily go to, and they don't really have a vehicle on an institutional level to invest here. There is no real seed stage fund that invests in Cleveland or invests in Ohio that's located in Cleveland, right? And there's no drive here. There's nothing even close to something like Drive Capital in Cleveland. So I think that's the other issue, is that in terms of allocation of capital, we don't really have like that premier fund that everyone is thinking about and going to. So how do we start that, or how do we solve that issue?
Sure. And you touched on our deep roots to manufacturing, and that goes well beyond Cleveland throughout to even Pittsburgh still struggles with this. A lot of people look at Pittsburgh as a heavy manufacturing city that kind of moved into tech. Kind of. They're still very much manufacturing. We do a lot out there too. So when I see all these manufacturers, I really think that we just need to double down on that, reinvest in them, get them all built back up into tech. Probably not through blockchain as much as like IoT, for example, or getting some of their their lines up to date, putting new sensors in, curating that data, making them manufacturers that pay attention to their data. Right, I think that's a major shift we need to make. But when it comes to those emerging technologies, do you have any do you work with AI or augmented reality or IoT at all? Any other buzzwords I could throw at you?
Well, first off, I completely agree with
Yeah.
what you said. I think that Cleveland doesn't need to reinvent itself, right? We already have this great history. Cleveland in the early 1900s was the automotive, manufacturing capital of the United States. It wasn't Detroit. It was Cleveland. The first cars to drive across the United States were built and manufactured in Cleveland, Ohio. The first car diesel engine built and manufactured in Cleveland, Ohio. Standard Oil was founded in Cleveland, Ohio. We have a rich entrepreneurial, innovative history here. We the reality is most likely the next Facebook is not going to come from Cleveland, Ohio, but maybe the next B2B app will, the next B2B unicorn could come from Cleveland, Ohio, because that's what we're good at, right? We have this manufacturing. We have a lot of there's big businesses here. You got Progressive that's headquartered here. You got KeyBank that's headquartered here. These are large Fortune 500 type companies. And how do we tap into that network? How do we encourage corporations to be innovative and to support innovation within the region? Because it doesn't just help these smaller companies, but it helps KeyBank, and it helps Progressive, and it helps whatever other the Edens of the world, all these other large companies. It helps them continue to stay innovative. So I totally agree that we need to leverage what we have here and figure out a way to turn that into a asset, because I think it's very much looked at as a negative right now, where you have all this old legacy tech here, all this legacy manufacturing. Rather, you should say, we have all these businesses here, all these resources. How do we turn them into the 21st century, so that Cleveland becomes the premier IoT hub, or Cleveland becomes whatever technology or solutions that we're trying to solve for these large corporations. So I completely agree with what you're saying there, and definitely think there's an opportunity on that. In terms of buzzwords, the core of my business now is a lot of it is really, strategic communication. So, we love working with people who are doing really interesting things on the technology front. So, all the buzzwords you want to name,
Sure.
We'll work with you to help you really brand and tell your story. Because I think what's really tough in the technology world is you have these really smart engineers who come up with this great technology, but they don't always know necessarily how do we talk about it. How do I craft a great story, and then how do I amplify it and really scale that message through different channels? And that's where we come in. We can help you, craft that story. So if you have, this IoT startup that's working on, microwaves you're starting out with, and you're like, oh, I have this cool technology, it makes microwaves more efficient, but I don't know how to talk about it, right? Because I build the tech. Well, that's where we come in, and we come in and help with that. So that's
No, that makes a lot of sense, because even going back to blockchain, explaining blockchain to a non-technical person or even a technical person that doesn't know a whole lot about it is an incredibly frustrating endeavor, right? Because to a lot of people, it's just very conceptual. It's hard to really sink their teeth into it. So, and then also, Bitcoin is blockchain, but blockchain isn't always Bitcoin. There's these weird little logic puzzles you play with people. And finding people that can translate that messaging, whether it's blockchain or whether it's IoT or whether it's AI, it's super important. Even with AI in particular, when you go into the various granular levels of machine learning, then deep learning, and then you have general AI, that one is actually on me.
Oh, good.
So when you go into even AI, you have general AI, you have machine learning, you have deep learning. It gets complicated, and it gets hard to explain all these things to people that aren't technical. They're not really inclined to understand that. As being kind of somebody that helps craft those stories, how do you go about messaging that? And do you have different messages for different groups, like the technical crowd or the business crowd or the home crowd?
Well, so before I answer that,
Yeah.
I think, just from a society point of view, and this isn't a technology thing or anything, I think that, we live in a world where there's so much noise and there's so much clutter. And I really I encourage people when I talk to them just in general to sometimes, how do I avoid the noise and just focus on what's in front of me and what's important. So I think that, many people when they speak, they try to make things more complex because you sound smarter, you sound more sophisticated. But what I learned is the smartest people tell stories in the most succinct way possible, because that's really how to get through to folks. There's the Reddit slang, which is ELI5, which means like explain it like I'm a 5-year-old, and I really think it's an important aspect in communication, and not just for like what we do, but just in general. I think for topics where people aren't necessarily technical at them or they don't understand them, explain it to them at a simple level so that they can buy into it, because that's really what's the most important thing. They don't necessarily need to understand it in the beginning, but they need to buy into it. And if you don't have buy-in, then you just can't succeed and you can't create scale. So how do you create buy-in with this messaging? So, tying it back into the work we do, I think a lot of what we do is trying to help these companies, think about how, especially if you're, a direct-to-consumer type brand, how do you tell your story, on a that directly resonates with the consumer, right? How do I tell a story that they go immediately, oh wow, I get it? And that's why things such as like Uber for X or Venmo for X are so popular in messaging and marketing, because you get it immediately. You're like, oh, I know what Uber is. Oh, they're doing this. I get it, right?
Yeah.
And telling those stories are so powerful. I always I love talking about Mad Men. It's very cliche, but I think the carousel scene is such a powerful messaging scene that every executive should look at. And for those who haven't seen it, A, I encourage you to go on YouTube and see it. But B, this idea is he's talking about the Kodak carousel, which is this projector that shows photos, which we all understand now. Like you just think of a PowerPoint, you hit next. We all understand that. We see the slides, we see the pictures scrolling, but in the 1960s, nobody understood it. It was such a brand new concept, and he talked about what was so powerful with a product is nostalgia and getting to the consumer on a deeper level so that they resonate with it. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. How do I take these things and connect with the consumer, or connect, if it's a B2B, connect with that business executive on a deeper level so that they understand it, because, they're buying from you because you're the expert. This is your field. So how do you convince them of that? And that's, what I think about it and what we try to do.
Well, but I think, kind of to play devil's advocate, one thing that I have definitely fallen into the trap of is oversimplifying my explanation of blockchain. So, like, I used to run around like, what's blockchain? If I knew that you were, like, somebody wasn't going to really be able to sink their teeth into it or didn't want to, I'd be like, it's a different way to trust. It's a way computers verify, the authenticity of a thing, right? And then to some people, they were like, they took it and walked away, and I really feel like I didn't give them a deep enough understanding of it. So to counter that, how do you just, when you're walking and talking to somebody about blockchain, what do you say?
So I think those are the people that you also, from a business perspective, aren't necessarily selling to in the beginning. So I think about someone like my grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandmother won't text. She's never going to learn how to text message. You just give up on that.
Well, she's going to start mining tomorrow, man.
So the reality of the thing, I do think, there are folks where no matter what you tell, no matter how long you sit with them, they're, this Luddite. And I'm not, if my grandmother's watching this, not, saying you're a Luddite, but
yeah.
I think there's these Luddites that, they just won't buy in. So I think, when we talk about this messaging, I think it's about getting people who are on the fence and starting with those folks and converting them. And then you could slowly start to explain it and sell to them once they're bought in. Because I was in the same position, I remember being pitched Ethereum, and this guy, the pitch was, this table is going to be on the blockchain. I'm like, what is the blockchain? I never heard of it.
Right.
And now, 7 years later, you're calling me an expert in this space.
Sure.
Which my friend, I still consider, much smarter than me, and he's a real expert in this space. But
I've met a lot of experts that know less.
Yeah. So I think that you want to, make sure you have the right audience. So yeah, there are folks where that oversimplification is, not the best, but they're also not the right audience.
Right. No, that's clearly put. So, obviously you're a young guy in this space. You've accomplished a lot. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your 5-year plan?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question, and I try not to look that far ahead. I think that
sure, 5 years is very far, right?
It's we don't know where the world's going to take us. It's such a I think we're really lucky, to live in a country like the U.S. where we have all this opportunity and freedom, and it could take us so many places. I didn't when I lived in Long Island, I never thought I'd be living in Cleveland, Ohio. I thought I'd live in New York City. I didn't know much about Cleveland, Ohio, except that LeBron was here. I actually didn't even know it was called the Mistake on the Lake, or that the river even caught on fire in the first place.
Usually a Clevelander tells somebody that in defense, like, oh, I'm sure you think we're the Mistake on the Lake, and then you're like, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
right?
So I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So, I'm just taking it a day at a time. Right now for us, it's just, about, doing good work for the clients we work with, and continuing to build our business. And, on a personal level and on a civic level, I'm hoping, how do I help Cleveland, and how do we get smarter folks here? How do we get, more companies here? And how do we really, turn Cleveland into a major player in terms of, this is a place people want to be and live in.
Do you see yourself staying in Cleveland then?
Yeah, I would like to. I would like to, continue to live here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. No, mid-market cities are my favorite to visit and do business in, for sure. And, comparing Cleveland to like Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Des Moines, Iowa, or Indianapolis, it's interesting because there's a lot of similarities that a lot of people don't draw. Particularly Cleveland and Grand Rapids. If you didn't tell me they were different cities, and I didn't have like this weird GPS in my brain of where the lake's at, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Right? It's the same people doing the same things. It's fascinating, and I think that long term, I think that all of these mid-market cities, kind of near the Great Lakes, are really going to start exploding more and more, especially as California sinks into the ocean. So I'm looking forward to that. I want to appreciate you, or sorry, I want to appreciate you. I want to thank you for jumping on, but I also want to give you any time to like plug any projects you're working on, or if you want somebody to find you somewhere on the internet. How do people find you?
Yeah. So first off, again, thank you for having me. My strategic communications firm is called Greenblock Group, and our website is greenblockgroup.com. The venture capital firm is called Grasshopper Capital. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's amlewis4, and then you should also subscribe to the Cleveland Tech newsletter, which I could give you the link for. So
we will do that.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, all right, thanks guys. Really appreciate you tuning in on this one. We'll catch you next week.